Arcadian Vanguard presents The Wrestling News, and your daily wrestling newscast for Friday, July 25th, 2025. Good morning. Filling in today for Mike Sempervive, I'm Lou Kipilman. With our main story, here's the news director and lead writer of The Wrestling News, Brian R. Solomon.
We begin today with unfortunate news. Hulk Hogan, arguably the most famous and historically important professional wrestler of all time, passed away yesterday morning at the age of 71, as was first reported by TMZ Sports. Paramedics reportedly arrived at Hogan's Clearwater, Florida home at approximately 9 a.m. Eastern in response to a report of cardiac arrest. He was treated by paramedics before being taken to a nearby hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 11:17 a.m. Rumors have been circulating for weeks regarding Hogan's health taking a grave turn, with some, including former friend and radio personality Todd Clem, aka Bubba the Love Sponge, reporting that Hogan had slipped into a coma, while others close to Hogan, such as his wife Sky, Eric Bischoff, and Jimmy Hart, had denied the rumors, stating that he was only recovering from surgery. Skyrocketing to global superstardom in the 1980s, Hulk Hogan was the centerpiece of the WWF's national and then international expansion, recruited by Vince McMahon to become the face of the company, forging a movement they called Hulkamania, which turned him into a household name and helped the WWF become the singular brand in professional wrestling. A decade later, he returned to relevancy in another watershed moment as part of WCW, reinventing himself as the leader of the New World Order and helping to usher in a new boom period in wrestling. And yet, his legacy was also a complicated one, diminished over the past several decades through a series of incidents, including a steroid scandal, the public splintering of his family, an infamous racist tirade, as well as the recent political polarization of his fan base as a result of his high-profile alliance with President Donald Trump. Born Terrence Gene Bollea on August 11, 1953, in Augusta, Georgia, the son of Peter and Ruth Bollea, he was raised in Port Tampa, Florida, where, as a young man, he took up the bass guitar in several Florida-based rock bands in the early 1970s, and also began attending regular wrestling cards put on by promoter Eddie Graham at the Tampa Sportatorium. He became a regular at the shows, and from an early age was inspired by the likes of Dusty Rhodes and superstar Billy Graham, from whom he'd eventually borrow liberally for his own wrestling persona. While playing with his band at a local bar, he was discovered by Florida mainstays Jack and Jerry Briscoe, who were impressed with his height and his muscular physique, the result of the weight training he'd taken up to emulate his favorite wrestlers. They helped him get trained by the notoriously tough Hiro Matsuda, and on August 9, 1977, the Briscoe brothers brought him to a show they were working at John Carroll High School in Fort Pierce, Florida, where he made his wrestling debut under a mask as the Super Destroyer, losing in the opening match to journeyman Don Serrano. After working several matches under the mask in Florida in the fall of '77, Bollea almost walked away from the business, but came back in the spring of 1979, ditching the mask and revealing for the first time his iconic platinum blonde hair and handlebar mustache, and wrestling on the Alabama circuit and in the Memphis territory as Terry the Hulk Boulder. By the fall of '79, he was being seen on national cable on Georgia Championship Wrestling as Sterling Golden, which brought him to the attention of Vince McMahon Sr. and was his ticket to the New York territory for the first time. It was McMahon who gave Bollea the name Hulk Hogan, putting him with Fred Blassie as his manager and debuting him as a monster heel in the WWF in November 1979. His first run there lasted nearly a year and a half and was highlighted by his first encounters with Andre the Giant, including a semi-main event at the 1980 Showdown at Shea. It was also during this run that Hogan first began working for Antonio Inoki's New Japan Pro Wrestling, where his fame would rise even more quickly than it was in the United States. According to an often repeated story, Hogan's first WWF run came to an end when he was offered the role of Thunderlips alongside Sylvester Stallone in Rocky III. Released in the summer of 1982, the movie catapulted Hulk Hogan into the mainstream consciousness, leading to appearances on Johnny Carson and elsewhere. In the midst of a 2-year run wrestling in Vern Gagne's AWA at the time, Hogan's newfound popularity was used to turn him babyface, and it was really in the AWA that the phenomenon known as Hulkamania was first born. Hogan feuded with well-established heel AWA world champion Nick Bockwinkel, but Gagne famously was reluctant to put the title on Hogan due to what he perceived as a lack of credible wrestling ability. When Vince McMahon Jr. selected him to be the standard bearer of his vision for a national WWF, Hogan was quick to jump ship back to New York at the end of 1983. On January 23, 1984, in 5 minutes and 40 seconds, Hulk Hogan defeated the Iron Sheik in Madison Square Garden to become the WWF World Heavyweight Champion. What followed was a national expansion for the company, with Hogan and his ballooning popularity leading the way. With Hogan as the main attraction, the WWF spread across the continent, and on the strength of his classic feud with Rowdy Roddy Piper, was featured on MTV, launched WrestleMania, and Saturday night's main event on NBC. Hogan became a 1980s pop culture icon. His likeness on Saturday morning cartoons, ice cream bars, action figures, and countless other merchandise items. Hogan became known, especially to his young fans everywhere, for tearing his shirt off before matches, for his post-match pose downs in the ring, for his Real American theme song, and for encouraging his supporters to train, say their prayers, and eat their vitamins. The highlight of this landmark run came on March 29, 1987, at the Pontiac Silverdome, when Hogan faced off against Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 before the largest crowd to ever witness pro wrestling in North America up to that point. It is often cited as the most famous wrestling match of modern times and helped solidify the WWF's control of the industry. Whether he was holding the title or not, Hogan remained at the top of the heap of the WWF through the remainder of the 80s and into the start of the 1990s. His fame carried over into other media, as he began appearing in motion picture vehicles such as No Holds Barred, Suburban Commando, and Mr. Nanny, which, while not especially successful at the box office or with critics, only raised his pop culture profile even further. By the early 1990s, the WWF found itself mired in a steroid scandal, with McMahon and Hogan at the center of it. Hogan's infamous appearance on the Arsenio Hall show in 1991, in which he denied using steroids, contributed to public opinion beginning to shift against the WWF and against Hogan. And despite taking almost a year off to allow the bad publicity to die down, by the middle of 1993, both sides parted ways, following Hogan's loss of the WWF Championship to Yokozuna at the 1993 King of the Ring. After taking some time to focus on wrestling in Japan and starring in the short-lived action series Thunder in Paradise, Hogan was scooped up by WCW, whose executive vice president, Eric Bischoff, hoped Hogan would help his company become the industry leader. Hogan debuted for WCW in the summer of 1994, but it would take 2 years before Bischoff's hopes were achieved. At the 1996 WCW Bash at the Beach, Hulk Hogan executed what many consider the most impactful heel turn of all time, abandoning Hulkamania and joining forces with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash to form the NWO. The NWO versus WCW angle became a highly successful storyline for WCW, and as Hollywood Hulk Hogan, the NWO leader was able to boost his career and name value once again, making up for years of stagnation that had occurred when fans started to grow tired of his babyface routine. The success of the NWO propelled WCW for several years, but by 1998, the WWF had gained the lead again, and by 2001, WCW had gone under and was purchased by the WWF, with Hogan making an unexpected return to the company later that year. Although originally intended as an NWO invasion angle alongside Hall and Nash, McMahon and WWE appeared to have underestimated remaining fan support for Hogan, and at WrestleMania 18 during his match against The Rock, the Toronto Skydome crowd was firmly behind Hogan, leading to WWE capitalizing by returning Hogan to his classic red and yellow superhero persona one more time. Hogan's final wrestling run with the WWF continued on and off for the next 4 years, saw him regain the title once again, and battle such 2000 stars as Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Brock Lesnar, and Randy Orton, plus get one more big WrestleMania match in 2003, this time against McMahon himself. He was also inducted to the WWE Hall of Fame in 2005 and would enjoy a second induction in 2020 as part of the NWO. It was also in 2005 that Hogan once again reasserted his presence in popular culture, this time with his whole family for the popular VH1 reality series Hogan Knows Best. It would be in TNA wrestling that Hogan would finish out his career as a full-time wrestling personality in the late 2000s and early 2010s, with his last singles match taking place at Bound for Glory 2011 against Sting. Months later, controversy once again arose when gossip website Gawker published portions of a leaked sex tape involving Hogan. Hogan sued the website for breach of privacy, but matters became worse when, in 2015, other portions of the tape were revealed that included Hogan making overtly racist comments about black people. The scandal led to WWE distancing itself from Hogan for a time and even temporarily rescinding his Hall of Fame induction. But Hogan eventually worked his way back into the company's good graces and was given several chances to rehabilitate his image, although the attitude of fans seemed to have turned, as was reflected by the lukewarm reactions of live crowds during this period. Hogan further polarized fans last year when he threw his full support behind then Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, including a public appearance at a Trump rally held at Madison Square Garden. Just 2 months later, Hogan appeared live at the Intuit Dome in California for the premiere of Monday Night Raw on Netflix and was loudly and consistently booed in an incident that made national news. It would be Hulk Hogan's last appearance in WWE. Hogan recently made headlines again in April when it was announced he would be launching a new shoot-fighting venture with Eric Bischoff called Real American Freestyle. But by June, rumors had begun to surface of Hogan's ill health, as first mentioned by Todd Clem on his radio show. Hogan was reportedly hospitalized at the time, but had been returned to his home earlier this week. Once again, Terry Bollea, known to millions of fans all over the world as Hulk Hogan, has passed away at the age of 71. He leaves behind his wife Sky, son Nick, and daughter Brooke, as well as an industry completely transformed by his impact. For the Wrestling News, I'm Brian R. Solomon.
In ratings news, this week's edition of AEW Dynamite was watched by 608,000 viewers on TBS, according to WrestleNomics. That's an increase of nearly 4% from last week's audience. The rating in the 18 to 49 demographic was 0.14, down nearly 7% from last week's rating. TNA Wrestling presented Impact live last night on Access TV and TNA Plus from the Ryan Center in Kingston, Rhode Island. In the main event, Mike Santana defeated Joe Hendry. Then the two men ended the show with a sign of respect. In other results, Jake Something beat Mance Warner in a no disqualification match. The Great Hands defeated Matt Cardona and Brian Myers. And in a 6-woman tag team match, the Elegance brand beat the Inspiration and Mara Charday. Ring of Honor streamed last night on Honor Club, featuring matches taped at the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago. In the main event, ROH World TV Champion Nick Wayne defeated El Gringo Loco in a non-title Proving Ground match. In other results, the Outrunners beat the Workhorsemen, Trish Adora topped Aaliyah James, Blake Christian and Lee Johnson went over David Ali and Isaiah Moore, and the Beast Mortos pinned Serpentico. Turning to Japan, the Stardom women's promotion ran its Stardom Nighter and Kurikan show on Thursday, which was streamed live on Stardom World from Kurikan Hall in Tokyo. In the main event, Natsuko Tora and Ruaka won the Goddesses of Stardom tag team title, knocking off Hanan and Saya Ida in 17 minutes 53 seconds. Other title matches on the show saw Mai Saira retain the high-speed title over Hanoka, and Azumi held on to the New Japan Strong Women's title, turning back the challenge of Bozilla. Before we leave you today, we'd like to remind you that however you consume your content, you can find the wrestling news 24 hours a day and 7 days a week across social media. On Twitter, follow us at Wrestling News AV. Our Facebook page is also Wrestling News AV. The Wrestling News can also be found on the Arcadian Vanguard YouTube page. And for those who utilize Amazon Echo devices, just tell Alexa to play the Wrestling News podcast. And remember to make sure you add podcast at the end. Once again, for daily updates, breaking news, and more, follow the Wrestling News across social media. And that's the news for today. If anything happens, we will be here to tell you about it. No clickbait, no paywall, just the Wrestling News. The Wrestling News is a division of Arcadian Vanguard, and the Wrestling Newscast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network.